Hi, I'm Jim Kielbaso from the IYCA, and I want to spend a few minutes talking about how to put together a comprehensive warm-up for pretty much anybody and anything that you might be doing. And I've essentially put together a rubric for you to think about and use when you put together your warm-ups. I'm going to encourage you, especially with younger athletes and in group situations, to take advantage of the warm-up section of your practice or workout to essentially each day lay like one brick in the athletic development foundation. Now, one warm-up alone doesn't mean that instantly people are going to be amazing athletes and you're going to take care of everything. But if you kind of incorporate all of the things that I'm going to talk about here in this rubric a little bit each day or throughout your week, over the course of time, so in a week, a month, an entire season, an athlete's career. You may have an athlete in high school for 4 years. You may only have them for 1 year, but if each day you're laying a little bit more of this foundation for an athlete, over time they're going to be more coordinated, smoother, in better shape, have a better work capacity. They're going to be able to essentially do everything a little bit better, and you can address small things each day to just kind of add layers to this foundation. So if you look at this rubric, essentially what you have is these are the things that you can or should, I believe, include in a warm-up routine. You've got fundamental motor skills or primal movements. So fundamental motor skills are covered in another video, but they're things like running, jumping, skipping, hopping, catching, throwing, twisting, dodging, striking, all of the things that basically a lot of people look at as like old school physical education movements. Primal movements are things like pushing, pulling, squatting, lunging, things that you would maybe more typically think of in a weight room or a strength training kind of situation. So these are kind of your basic things. You can also include in there things like crawling or carrying to a certain extent. And all of these things can also be kind of changed depending on the age group that you're working with. So you may stick with somewhat basic exercises or combinations for your youngest athletes, but maybe you want to ramp up the coordination and you're going to start to make combinations, as you'll see here in a second. The second one are flexibility and mobility type of exercises. You're going to want to address the ankles, knees, hips, spine, shoulders at a very minimum. Those are the main areas that you're going to try to address in a warm-up routine. If you don't address every single one of them perfectly, maybe you don't hit all the planes of motion for the hips in every single warm-up, but you should be doing that throughout the course of a week. Strength exercises in a warm-up routine is mainly going to be body weight type of exercises. So you're looking at things like push-ups, planks, lunges, and squats. Plyometrics and footwork drills. So your plyometrics can range from very easy plyometrics like line hops for a short period of time to more intense exercises like squat jumps, broad jumps, split squat jumps. And you can see how plyometrics and strength work can almost start to interrelate, especially for young athletes. Something like doing 10 split squat jumps for a 9 or 10-year-old, that's going to be kind of a combination between plyos and strength work. You can also do footwork type of drills, so you can incorporate ladder drills or drills where you're just moving your feet over a line or in and out or like in different patterns in different directions. You've got sports skills and movements. So now for a sport coach, you may actually start a workout or a training session out with, say, if you're with basketball players, they may be dribbling a basketball, and then you may stop them and do a fundamental motor skill. Maybe they do some running, or maybe you do some plyometrics, so you do a line hop, and then you go back into your left hand dribbling. Or maybe you start going through the legs, and then you stop and you do a stretch. You may drop down into a perfect stretch, or some inchworms, or some knee hugs. Anything that kind of breaks it up, and then back into what you were doing. So you can incorporate sports skills or movements into your warm-up routine. And then the last thing is speed and agility, and that's going to kind of transition your warm-up into a workout. So you may start to do some build-up sprints, you may do some technique work, you may do some low-level agility or change of direction movements as part of your fundamental motor skills. So now, once you start deciding or thinking about incorporating a little bit of all of these into your warm-up, then you're going to have some other variables. So you're going to have the different planes of motion, so sagittal, frontal, and transverse. Some people will think of it simply as just different directions, being able to travel in multiple directions. You're going to have your work to rest ratio. So how long is this whole thing going to be? Your warm-up routine needs to last about 7 minutes. That's kind of, if you're doing a rhythmic type of warm-up routine, that's going to start to increase the core temperature. But your warm-up routine could last 20, even 30 minutes if you want to start adding some fitness, more of a fitness component, or you're kind of working right into your workout routine. So your work to rest ratio is going to be how far you're going on each exercise. So, maybe you pick backpedaling or jogging or shuffling. Are they going to go 20 yards? Are they going to do this for time? Are you going to give them a break in between, or are you going to roll right into your next exercise? So this is essentially going to start to determine the intensity of your workout and the fitness component to your warm-up. Some people will do longer runs at the beginning, so maybe you're going 50 yards for every single fundamental motor skill. Essentially, you're moving through different planes of motion, but you're turning this into almost, you're getting the heart rate up, turning it into a fitness type of workout. And then the last one is going to be combinations. Can you combine any of these things to start to add layers to the complexity or the coordination aspect of your warm-up? And so I'll show you some examples here in blue of some of the things that you may think about. So for your fundamental motor skills or primals, you may be doing skipping, but you may want to start to incorporate different planes of motion. So maybe you start doing lateral skipping. So that's when you're skipping and you're moving sideways. Or you could skip in circles to get some transverse plane movement. You may kind of combine it with plyometrics and do power skips or long skips as part of this. Sometimes you could have athletes combine shuffling with throwing and catching. They could be against a wall and they could be doing like a skipping motion while they're throwing with both hands if you wanted to really increase the coordination, the hand-eye, and the body control component. For flexibility, mobility, you may do something like an inchworm, where you're in a push-up position, they walk their feet in, and then they walk their hands out. You could combine inchworms, so a flexibility, mobility type of exercise, with a strength exercise by adding push-ups. So they walk their feet in, they walk their feet out, maybe you do 5 push-ups. You can do this for a certain number of repetitions, so doing this 2 or 3 times is going to be a lot easier than if you say, well, we're going to do this for 50 yards. Or you're going to do this 10 times. 10 times 5 push-ups, now you're getting 50 push-ups in along with the flexibility and mobility aspect of it. You may start to add different reaches into your strength exercises. So maybe you're doing 3D lunges. So instead of just doing a straight ahead lunge, now maybe you're doing a frontal plane lunge or a rotational lunge where you're opening up and lunging. You may add different reaches to add a stretch to your strength exercise. So you can add some of these things to it. You could also add throws. So maybe they're up against a wall and they are lunging and throwing a ball into something, into the wall or with a partner. So you can start to combine these things. You could also combine jumping or plyometrics or footwork. So maybe they do a lunge and then they have to go in and out 3 or 4 times, and then a lunge in and out 3 or 4 times. You could add, if you really want to, then again the throwing or hand-eye coordination type of drills. You can also start to incorporate in some of the plyometrics and footwork or strength exercises a balance component, especially for your younger athletes. So a balance component could be added if you're going to do like a jump. You may jump and land on one foot and balance. You may do stretches that require balance. So maybe you're holding on to one foot and you're reaching forward and you have to balance on one foot. For a lot of athletes, just simply standing on one foot is going to be somewhat difficult. So that's how you can add to the complexity or the combinations. Some of the other combinations that you could do with the fundamental motor skills, let's say you're out on a field, a football field with 5 yards lined up everywhere. You could have them run forward, backpedal 5 yards, run forward 10, backpedal 5. They could run forward, they could shuffle. They could run forward, backpedal, shuffle, spin, and then run up 10 yards. You could have them run forward, shuffle, jump, spin. You could start to turn it into almost a game of like follow the leader. And I really encourage you to use your warm-up time not just to say like, hey, like everybody go run 2 laps and and then we're going to get started. You're going to have to be active and present to take all this on so that it can be a little bit different every time. Some people will say, well, I want to have somewhat of a routine. Well, I like a routine also. So sometimes you may give the athlete something to do that's a very basic warm-up routine and say, this is the warm-up routine that I need you to get done. And then after that, you start to build on it to kind of transition from some basic movements and basic warm-up routine activities into maybe starting to do some combinations that get them a little bit more engaged in the process. Your whole warm-up routine, again, should be looked at as like building the foundation by adding work on fundamental motor skills, the flexibility and mobility. You can really increase the strength of an athlete, especially if they're not used to strength training, or this is they're young athletes and this is going to be kind of their first experience with all this. And start to experiment with all these things so that you can build a better warm-up routine. It can be a little bit different each time, and you can make it more fun and start to enjoy the time that you have with your athletes to see what they need, and start to give them a little bit more of what they need and what may challenge them as they progress as athletes. So hopefully this gives you kind of a template to work with to start to build out your warm-up routines and create a million different versions, because really it doesn't have to be the same each time. The last thing I want to mention is that a lot of coaches want something a little bit easier to do or more simplified or routine before a competition. And I would kind of agree with that too. Sometimes you want to use a longer warm-up routine during your practice sessions so they get used to all of this, and then have something a little bit more basic and straightforward that they're going to do before a competition that they can do the same every time. That's kind of a routine. It will get their mind ready for the competition. And if you've been working on a more intense, longer warm-up routine in practice, then a shorter, condensed, standardized warm-up right before a competition will it'll make them feel good, they'll be ready, they'll be energized, but it'll feel much easier so that they're ready for competition. So this is how you can start to put together a million different warm-up routines.